It's great to be with you right here on ET. Now we kickstart what we are calling the super prime time budget debate on the show this evening. I'm Supriya, Shrinate in New Delhi, and joining me all the way in Mumbai is Sandeep, Gurumurthi.
That's right, we're breaking routine programming, 10 days to budget 2017. We're calling it a tryst with destiny because so much is at stake. And so, over the next 10 days, every day we're going to get you a power-packed debate analyzing various aspects in the build-up to what is being billed as the most critical budget of the Modi government. Joining us to take stock of the economy and the progress made in the 2.5 years of this NDA government. We've got a very special panel joining us on India Tonight's budget debate this evening. We've got Bhupendra Yadav of the BJP, Manish Tewari of the Congress, and noted economist Arvind Virmani. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us right here on India Tonight. Mr. Yadav, let me kick this conversation with you. On the one hand, the broad macroeconomic parameters are looking good without a doubt, whether it's growth at 7% at a time when the world is slowing down, inflation, which is at about little over 3.4%. But the fact remains that the promise of Achhe Din, on the plank of which this government came to power, on the plank of which Narendra Modi was voted to power, has not been delivered wide, across various segments of society, whether it's for corporate India, the Aam Aadmi, the farmer, the rural, household. No one's felt the Achhe Din just yet. Would you concede that?
No, I am not agree with you, because if you see the complete economic scenario of this country, there is a strong private consumption is there. There is a gradual introduction of significant domestic reforms in our country, and there is so much systematic reforms done by the government in last 2 years. The corporate sector and industry need bankruptcy and insolvency law that was ultimately passed by our government. The corporate government and the NPAs in the bank, they require the amendments in the Securitization Act and the Banking Act that was amended by the government. And government was able to pass the GST law by the consensus also. And government was taking major steps toward the fight against the black money. Even you see the last data which is produced by the finance minister also regarding the direct tax mop-up, it was increased 44.4%. The indirect taxes grew 26.2%. The central excise is up 43.3%. The service tax by 25.7%. So the government take a strong decision, the decision in the interest of a poor person, a Garib Aadmi of this country, and that is the reason people are hoping for a good budget and a good economic improvement in our country.
Okay. Manish Tewari, if I may throw the same question to you. And you've got to wear the opposition's hat to answer that question. How will you assess the economic performance of this government? Mr. Yadav there has rattled a few numbers. Some of them make the government's performance look good. But what, according to you, is going to be the assessment? Because if you look at broad economic parameters, both CAD and fiscal deficit under control, inflation is at low. Some people believe it may not be good for emerging economies. Growth that was looking up. How would you assess the first 2 years or first 2.5 years as this budget is being presented?
Well, Supriya, honestly speaking, there is not a single big economic idea which this government has been able to incubate in the last 30 months. Yes, they've been able to see the goods and services tax through, but as you are aware, goods and services tax was many years in the making. The interesting thing to watch out for would be as to how much has this currency swap, which is colloquially called demonetization, really impacted the economic numbers, because you were talking about the macroeconomic indicators being in order. But the fact is that if you dehorse what I keep referring to as the statistical jugglery in the GDP rates, we are actually on the old rate of 2004-2005, the old base year, doing just about 5%. Which by no stretch of imagination is a really good economic number. And if the results of the last quarter, of course, they will not get factored in because the budget is being presented on the 1st of February, which in any case is another impropriety, that would not really come in. But overall, it would be interesting to see if this currency swap has really had an impact, even in the tail end towards the budget numbers.
I do have a lot of questions on currency swap and also on the big ideas that weren't incubated with both Mr. Yadav and you, Mr. Tewari. But just hold your thoughts there, because it's time to throw that question to the economist amongst us. And Dr. Virmani, the government, of course, very boastful of what it has done in the last 2 years. The opposition putting the government on the mat. The truth, I'm presuming, has to lie somewhere in between. Or are you willing to throw your weight behind the two arguments that are being made?
Well, the economic growth has been basically flat, more or less around 7.5% for several years now. But the way I judge the government is more on the economic reforms. I think the economic reforms have taken place, but there has been no breakout in the growth rate. So, in that sense, if we focus on that part of it, given the economic reforms, the question one would analyze as an economist is, why is it that these reforms have not been effective? There are several factors. Two I'll mention, and then we can pursue. One, of course, is the double drought which was there in the last 2 years, and therefore we should have seen some sort of breakout this year. And second is, the reason why we're not seeing that is because demonetization, in a sense, has kind of disrupted that from happening. So we are kind of left wondering, which is unfortunate, because I had hoped to see real rebalancing of the economy in this current year, but we will not see that partly because of demonetization. Of course, there are factors, external factors. One has mentioned there's been a period of huge uncertainty, actually ever since the global financial crisis, and every time it looks like things are going to stabilize, something happens internationally.
Fair enough. Let me take those points. Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, the points that Dr. Virmani made, you can't fault the government for the drought. You can't fault the government for global factors. It's not the government's fault that there's been a Brexit. But demonetization, is it a self-goal? Because here we were coasting at over 7.5% growth. Now we don't know how much are we going to grow at for this fiscal. The CSO estimates that it could be 7%. One gets a feeling it could be significantly lower than that as well. The consumption story that you spoke about as well, consumption-led growth is what is being questioned. And at least for the next couple of quarters, one gets a feeling, if you look at corporate earnings, today we saw Hindustan Unilever report a volume degrowth of 4%. One gets a feeling that the consumption story is also going to be seriously challenged over the next couple of quarters. For you. Mr. Yadav, if you can hear me, I was asking you the point that Dr. Virmani made. Yeah, yes. The point that Dr. Virmani made on the fact that, one of the reasons why we haven't had a breakout so far is because of drought, external factors, and the third point that he made was on demonetization. That surely is a self-goal, isn't it?
No, it's not, because I will tell you the demonetization will have a very good impact in our economy, even the long term also, because of the demonetization, we are having a good proportion of black money re-entered into our economy. The second thing, the steps taken by the government of demonetization sent a strong message to the people who have a illegal money. The third thing, it will boost the good governance also. It is also making economy more transparent and accountable. And so the next thing which we want for our country for the purpose of the trade and all these things, that the demonetization steps of the government boost to the digital transaction and cashless economy. That is the requirement for our country, because if we are able to eradicate the corruption, we are able to social inclusion of a poor person, then we are definitely going ahead with our economy.
Sure. Let me throw to Manish Tewari, and I get the point that the long-term upside of demonetization is something that we'll have to wait and watch. It's too early for us to say that is there upside going to be there or not. But Manish Tewari, you spoke about this demonetization. You chose to call it a currency swap, whatever you may call it. The fact is that at worst it's going to be 2 quarters of pain. We're going to see growth numbers lag for maybe a couple of quarters. Does that really matter in the larger course of the economic evolution of a nation? Does that really matter if it's going to give us those structural benefits that the government is talking about?
Well, I have a fundamental disagreement with the entire basis of demonetization. I have said it earlier that it is per se illegal, and there are substantive questions of law which the Supreme Court has now seized off, which go to the very heart of the decision which was taken on the 8th or the 9th of November 2016. Be that as it may, the Supreme Court will adjudicate upon that. Number two, what is equally germane is that this equation that cash is equivalent to black money, it's conceptually flawed. In a country where 65% of the people depend upon agriculture for their livelihood, and agriculture is exempt from taxation, and most of these transactions actually take place in cash. You've really put agricultural India or rural India through a lot of distress. And number three, when you talk about making the economy cashless, if you go by a report which was put out by one of the industry chambers, the internet penetration is abysmally low. About 850 million odd people, still do not have internet connectivity. So therefore, while this could have been a movement which could have been calibrated, which could have been done with a certain amount of sophistication, the fact that you've tried to sledgehammer it through, I think is going to have implications which are going to be fairly serious in the medium term.
Right. I think Bhupendra Yadav wants to make a point here, and Mr. Yadav, I will allow you to do that, but I will also throw a question at you. I know you have a rebut for Mr. Tewari there, but your government came on the plaque of development, on job creation. Do you believe at one level, when you step back and see how things are, the lack of job creation is really going to stare you in the face? I mean, employment generation in 8 labor-intensive sectors in 2009 was 12,50,000. In 2015, it dropped to 1,35,000. That is surely going to bite someone, and it usually bites the party in power.
I want to say first thing, whenever we are taking a steps in the interest of a poor people, whenever we are taking a steps for corruption, against the corruption, whenever we are taking a steps to giving a rightful right to a poor person, definitely our opposition party says that it is illegal, but it is a constitutional and it is a mandate which is given by the countrymen to us. Why? Reason, I will tell you one thing. Now we introduce the Aadhaar bill. What is the Aadhaar bill? Aadhaar bill means direct delivery to a poor person, but the Congress party oppose it. Now second thing, we are saying about the digital transaction. They themselves in their white paper and black money that they published in 2012, they advocated for that digital transaction. But when they introduced by our party and we really introduced in a real manner, then they oppose it and they said that it is illegal. The thing is, we are taking the steps of demonetization in the interest of this country, and there is a parallel economy in our country. You tell me, question me about the growth of the job and all other opportunity. But when there is a parallel economy in this country, when there is an economy which is a black economy, when there is a corruption is there, our country require a good decision, a strong decision, and a strong decision taken by the government. The third thing I want to say, my friend says about what is the whether the platform is available or not. Now I want to give some data. In our country, we are having a 125 crore people. We are having 107 crore mobile phone. 35% mobile phone is a smartphone. We are having a 147 crore accounts. 117 crore account is a saving account. There is a 25 crore account is a Jandan account. There is a 75 crore debit card is also available in this account. So we can't say that we don't have infrastructure. Let us we go together. Let us we use the technology and the transparent governance. If we use both things, then we are able to give a good governance, and that step taken by my government as well as the steps taken by the present government in the interest of the people.
Mr. Yadav, hold your thoughts there, because you did not answer the question about jobs, and I'm going to throw this to Dr. Virmani here. I quoted the figures for 2019, which was 12.5 lakh. I quoted 2015, which was 1.35 lakh. I'm also going to quote a very important figure that is now in public domain. Credit growth is at 6.6%, which is a historical low. It's the lowest it has been in 2 years. So if credit offtake is not going to happen, there will be no investments. If there will be no investments, there will obviously be no job creation. So this is a very vicious cycle that we seem to have got into. And believe it or not, both Manish and Bhupendra, demonetization is only going to accentuate this further. Dr. Virmani, how bad is the situation when we look through the prisms of the numbers that I throw at you?
See, as we all have noted, the investment, corporate investment particularly, is very low. And I'll just get into the reason for a minute, after a minute. And that is connected to the credit growth, because much of the credit historically goes to the corporate sector, the formal sector credit. So the question is, I think all of us, I can't think of a single economist who has not correctly predicted the investment recovery. I mean, this is probably one of the longest cycles of underperformance of investment in the kind of modern age, if I may call it, not going back too far historically. And the reason is there is huge excess capacity globally in tradable sectors in which China participates. And that was really my reference, what I said about global conditions, means that, for example, just to give you a few examples, metals, for example, is a very capital intensive sector which used to attract a lot of investment. So you got investment and corporate investment particularly. Now, given that there is this huge excess capacity created by China, it's not going to be recovered in a hurry. So there are these international reasons, but the point on the other side that I was making was that given a whole series of reforms that have taken place, one expected this cycle to start recovering. I mean, we have been disappointed before, but I frankly, I believe strongly that that recovery would start this year. And unfortunately, as I said, there's been so much uncertainty created by the demonetization that this is maybe postponed further by another year or so.
Fair enough. Manish Tewari, comment on that. This government came on the whole development card. Dr. Virmani, complete your point. Dr. Virmani, complete your point.
Yeah, your direct question on jobs.
Sure.
Jobs are clearly much more dependent on the agricultural sector. So that is the part I expected also to recover quite strongly this year. May still happen, but I'm not sure anymore.
You're expecting recovery, but Manish Tewari, the data that Supriya was talking about is very, very, very stark. And this was a promise made. Really, your government, the UPA government, was voted out because of its inability to create jobs, and that was a key plank on which this government came to power. Is that the biggest failure, according to you, lack of job creation by the NDA government?
Well, ultimately, that was a wrong promise which was made to the people of India. Look, we need to understand one thing very clearly, that the manufacturing ship sailed 3 decades ago. So therefore, if you are now trying to jump onto the manufacturing bandwagon, I would say that it is just too little too late. And let's also understand that a lot of countries which grew because of manufacturing grew in a neoliberal economic environment where manufacturing was getting outsourced, China being the perfect example. But now with the walls going up, with President Trump talking about Buy American, Hire American, the entire spectre of nationalism across Europe as evidenced by Brexit and the rise of right-wing parties all across Europe. So therefore, eventually the entire model of globalization as it stands, or as it has stood for the last 25 odd years, is itself under very severe stress and strain. The irony is that today one of the biggest proponents and advocates of globalization is President Xi Jinping, who is actually the president of the leader of a communist party and the president of a communist nation.
Fair enough. The other issue that we must talk about is the NPA problem, because Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, that's a serious area of concern. It almost seems as if now the demonetization narrative has hijacked the NPA problem and no one seems to be talking about it, including we in the media. And the figures again are very startling. The gross NPA at September 15, 5.1%. Gross NPA at September 2016, 9.1%. A series of steps were taken, and somehow one gets a feeling that that momentum is completely gone. Is the government sleeping as far as fixing the NPA mess is concerned, Mr. Yadav?
As far the NPA is concerned, definitely there are 70,000 cases pending in the courts near about the money involved of the 5 lakh rupees. But these NPAs created because of the wrong decision taken by the previous government. But today we say that if the wrong decision was taken, then to meet out with this situation, it's required a legislative reforms. In my earlier statement, I have already stated that we brought the bankruptcy insolvency law, we brought the certain amendment in the SURFACE law, we brought the certain amendment in the DRT law also, only purpose that today the litigations are pending in the courts, they must be resolved. That steps already taken by the government. The second thing, we have also empowered the functioning of the bank much fair and in the transparent manner. The earlier the decision taken by the government is only to strengthen the transparency manner in the banking system. That steps already taken by the government. Third, we also whatever steps we have taken in the interest of the good governance. And I want to say one thing, that after this demonetization effect, in future we will get a fair GDP, and fair GDP definitely help to improve the economic situation and condition of the country.
Okay, just hold your thoughts there. I get your point about a fair and transparent GDP and more accountability there, but I do want to go on the point as far as banks are concerned. And Dr. Virmani, you're the economist amongst us. The focus or the fulcrum of the discussion around banks has completely shifted. Nobody is talking about NPAs, and Sandeep did point out the numbers for 5.1%, which is almost double to 9.1 a year later. What does this mean for the government? Because credit offtake is a function of what banks' balance sheet look like, and guess what? Banks are now saddled with the liability of paying interest on the money that has been parked in the system. So banks are in a big mess, and they want a lifeline as well, it seems.
Yeah, certainly the point you have made earlier about credit growth being slow is partly linked to the NPAs, which are quite high. Now, as most financial experts will tell you, the first step in this is to make everything transparent, which is happening. The second step really is recapitalization of the banks. That has not been happening to the extent that is really should happen. And the third one, of course, is that there should be a increased demand for capital, for credit, and that is not there because the capacity utilization is still around 72%. It was 65% about 3 years ago, and it's not risen that significantly. So yes, NPAs is still an issue. Recapitalization or disinvestment of PSUs remains an issue, which should be on the government's table in terms of future reforms. And here I should just mention, harking back to your previous question on labor, certain elements of labor reform are still should be on the government's agenda.
All right, fair point indeed. But let's now turn focus and talk to Bhupendra Yadav about something that we in media, at least in financial journalism and markets and ratings agencies obsess a lot over, and that is fiscal prudence versus growth. You do have NK Singh's panel that has submitted its report on FRBM today, but the caution there is it's not just a report on fiscal deficit, it is also a report on debt management, which means that they have suggested means and ways on government borrowing. The government can't borrow endlessly. Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, do you believe it is time that your government throws caution to the wind, doesn't care about ratings agencies, says we're going to take a leap from fiscal prudence this year or perhaps even next, and throw its weight behind growth, investments, public sector expenditure and all of that? Or do you believe it warrants that you stick to fiscal discipline?
Definitely the steps taken by the earlier by our government also is about the physical discipline, but the committee has already extended their time. So let us wait for the report also, but our government on both on the physical discipline as per the monetary policy is concerned, I think the government will take a decision with the appropriate time, and because the budget is coming, so what steps and action will be taken by the government, it will become very soon after the budget.
All right, let me get closing comments from all my panelists then, and I'm going to come to you, Dr. Virmani, which is really on, given the context of this budget, would you agree when we say that this is probably going to be the most critical budget of the NDA government? The fact that it's coming mid-term, the fact that, that after this the government will probably get into election mode, 2019 election mode. Do you believe that this is a now or never moment for this government? And in that context, what can we really expect from the NDA government?
See, I think we don't have time, but it's not that important because it's in the midterm, but it's very important because it's coming after the demonetization. And I think it's critical that the government use this opportunity to enhance the positives of the demonetization and reduce the negatives. So that is where most of the tricky problems are going to come. Can they do both those and put the economy back on the trend growth, which at least I and several other people had thought would happen this year? But that raises some critical choices, like the one you just mentioned, where is it more important to stick to the fiscal deficit and enhance the credibility, which may have been shaken a little bit, or is it more important, for example, to do the tax reforms which are very, very critical to sustaining the positive benefits of demonetization on black money and corruption, etc., related to taxation?
Oh, that's an important point that you're talking about. But Manish Tewari, since you were in the opposition and your government did stick to fiscal discipline and harped on it endlessly, what do you think this government should be doing? I mean, isn't it time that the Modi government pushes spending, public sector expenditure, and not obsess about the deficit? In fact, the panel also seems to have submitted a report which talks about expansionary stance on the fisc and not over-obsession on it.
Well, Supriya, that's a very interesting conceptual question that you raised. The fact is that there have always been advocates who believe that the fiscal line should not be held, and therefore there should be enhanced public spending. But that is not a thought which this government came from. They always believed that higher growth would come out of greater amount of private sector participation in economic activity, which has not happened. So therefore, if let's suppose they are going to reverse the paradigm and go in for increased public spending, then essentially what the BJP is doing is that they are morphing from a center-right party to a center-left party, which believes that spending government money is the way to promote economic activity. And if that is the ideological switch which they intend making for whatever reason, well, that's a call that they have to take.
All right, we'll give the last word to the ruling party because that is where the budget will finally come from. Bhupendra Yadav, I have a more contrarian question to ask of you. Because the CSO did not put out the impact of demonetization and that impact is not visible in the Indian economy in terms of the numbers that have been reported in the last 2 months, the numbers in fact are contradictory to that position. Do you believe in some sense we're all budgeting in the dark before this big fiscal exercise?
Now, government has already completed its exercise, and I think the government has taken all steps, and what steps taken by the government as far the demonetization is concerned, it was taken by the full preparation by the government, and government is aware about all the facts, and I think in the budget that we will see, the budget will be able to give a message to the people of this country that Sabka Saath and Sabka Vikas, and this budget will, this all promise of the government will come in that budget.
All the promises made by the government and the Prime Minister come true in this budget. We for sure will welcome that. Mr. Bhupendra Yadav, Manish Tewari, Dr. Arvind Virmani, thank you so much for joining us on the big debate right here on ET Now. That's the first of a series of debates in the build-up to Budget 2017. We are calling it a tryst with destiny because we do believe that this could well be a tryst with destiny if the government gets it right.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.